to understand what the schools should do, but it's more than most people have as an evidence base before making pronouncements on it. Having gone to school once is usually enough for most of our ministers, I think. So I don't know how much I should draw on that. And I'm pleased to see how many have remained despite the weather. I was a bit worried I'd be speaking to three people as you all headed off home as the red alerts are coming in. But you may all be trapped here as a result of that because the weather's coming. So I've extended my talk to about 3 hours. Just put in the time for people. And I've got a theme for my talk. I was trying to remember a joke. I don't know if you will have heard this one, I'm sure, that you should never argue with an idiot because they will just drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. And I'm going to talk about change, and I'm going to talk about pressure inside schools in relation to the themes that I've been given. And I want to just adapt that saying in a moment, is that I don't think you can deal with rapid change in the system by just trying to beat it at its own game and change even more quickly than the change that you face. And I don't think you can deal with the pressure that's being exerted on schools by trying to create more pressure of your own. I think we need to be much more nuanced about that and try and flip those around. And as things change more and more quickly, we need to slow down to a degree. And as pressure grows around schools, we need to find ways to release and relieve that pressure inside our schools. So the job is not to beat them at their own game, but to pick the territory that we want to fight on. And that joke had nothing to do with ministers or anything like that. So I was given 2 prompts and questions. One was, what can schools do, what can the system do? And then the second one was, do we ask too much of schools as a result of that? And the second one is the easier one to answer. What can we do, what can schools do and the system do to prepare young people for the future? So the first point to build on my theme is that we always talk about rapid change. We always talk about how the jobs of the future haven't yet been created, about how new policies are coming into school repeatedly. How do we know what future we're preparing young people for? And it's been a classic of, I think, the old ICT curriculum, where people would say there's not much point in preparing people to use particular software packages, because by the time they get into the workplace, those software packages will have been replaced by something completely different. What do? Do we train people ever faster? Do we adapt our schools ever more quickly to face the changing trends that we face? Now that's one solution to it, but I think that that will eventually lead us into a sort of arms race of speed and change as schools try and keep pace with changing society. My argument would be that perhaps what we really need to do is to slow down a bit and to say that we cannot know what people would need to be doing in 10 years' time, but we can know some of the enduring truths about what it means to grow up in our country, what it means to be able to succeed in life, and that actually we should be looking for the kind of things that endure whatever the changes are going on, and allow people to have the sort of resilience and capacity to then build on that to meet the specific needs of any moment in time. And I think we can be confident, for example, that in the digital age, numeracy and literacy are not going to go out of fashion. That actually they will be as relevant as they've ever been, and that we can go back and do those enduring disciplines, if you like. And I think when we're facing lots of change, we can be confident that history isn't going to cease to be useful to us. We may want to look at different periods and time. I think we can be confident that great literature is not going to go out of fashion either. I don't think we have to try and keep pace with what the next trend is emerging from the internet or what the next Silicon Valley giant is doing. We can step back and try and slow the pace of change down and focus more on the enduring areas. I think that if we are trying to also prepare young people for the future, one of the things that we are going to have to take account of, and I think these are fairly commonplace ideas, is that they will have hopefully a long life and a long career ahead of them, and they will face a great deal of change of their own in that. My daughter, I think, has at least an even chance of seeing the 22nd century. Which I think is incredibly exciting. I can remember when just getting to the 21st century seemed like an act of science fiction as well. The idea that someone could be seeing the year 2100 who's in school today, I think is just such an exciting prospect. But the idea that we're going to do the way that we've always done it, in terms of having a chunk of education at the start, working for what must be like 50 or 60 years or something after that, and then a long retirement, I just don't think is going to be able to happen. and people are going to have to reinvent themselves on several occasions. They're going to have to get to the point in time where they do find that everything that they've been working to build, all of the achievements and the credentials that they put together, are no longer as relevant as they used to be. And they need to be able to regard that with some degree of optimism and think, right, I can reinvent myself and head off in a new direction. And I think the level of resilience that we therefore need to build in people is going to be considerable as a result of that. But I think there's lots of thinking that's being done in schools around that. I think we can also be clear, some of the populist trends notwithstanding, that we're going to be operating in an increasingly interconnected and global society. And the skills of empathy and being able to understand people from diverse cultures are also going to be at the heart of succeeding in this world that we're creating. And actually, again, I'm not entirely sure we need to reinvent a lot of what's going on inside schools to be able to tackle with that. There's a lot of good evidence that it's the work that we do on the creative side of things, in reading great literature, in engaging with drama, and in the expressive arts that is enabling people, which is the fundamental skill we need to build these bridges, to put themselves in other people's shoes. And it seems to me the heart of an education is being able to see the world from someone else's perspective, at least for a little bit of time. And I think that's all we need to do. And again, we can go back to some of the basics that we've always been doing in order to achieve that. The final thing that I think we'll need to, there's many things, but the final thing I want to dwell on that I think we need to equip young people with to face that long and rapidly changing future is that they've got to have ambitions and aspirations to navigate themselves through that. They've got to want to make the most of their education system and aim forward. And this is where I think I transition into the second part of the question, do we ask too much of schools? Can schools do it alone? And I think it's impossible. No, that's wrong. I think it's very difficult for schools to create aspiration operating entirely by themselves. I think when we look at the difference in journey between the London Challenge and how schools were able to rise to the ambitions and aspirations of the culture and communities that surrounded them, and we try and translate those same tactics into communities where we have 3 generations of unemployment and people are asking, why on earth would I bother investing in my skills for the future? Now, I think you can challenge that. I don't want to give a counsel of despair, but it is so much easier if schools are operating with the support of the wider society around them, that can create opportunities where the local economy has jobs that people can get involved in. And that's why I don't think we can ask schools to do all of this by themselves. So let me just move on for the last bit, on to the second part of the question, do we ask too much of schools, that I was challenged. My simple answer to that is yes, of course we do. Unfortunately, schools seem to me to be easy targets, sitting ducks, if you like. Whenever a part of our society has a problem or something goes wrong, it's really easy to point to schools as being the institution to fix this. And not a week goes by, really, before someone else suggests that we should put something else on the curriculum. And I think it's always a sign that a politician has no idea how to solve a problem when they say, right, we'll ask schools to do it, or we'll ask Ofsted to inspect it. And I used to keep in my old role a running total of the number of different things that we asked that people suggested Ofsted should inspect. We would have needed a 2-week inspection window to get through all of that, including whether they were teaching young children to swim, and it goes on from there. Whenever we don't know what to do about a society, we say, let's put it in the curriculum. And in a way, that's a recognition of the fundamental power that schools do actually have. Because I don't believe there is any problem that we can't solve by starting with a well-educated citizenship. And we can begin on all of these problems. But if we only come back to schools and cease to see schools as part of a network of other services and support, then I think we're going to continually ask too much of schools. I think we can also, in asking too much of schools, prey on the conscience of people who work in schools, and the recognition that actually, unless someone does step in and solve these problems, that you can't actually do the job that you were trained to do in the first place. That you can't teach a child who comes into school scared or hungry or with problems with their housing or who is unwell, or any of the multitude of problems that young people face, that teachers, more than anybody else, see and are able and willing to step in. And I think it speaks very highly of the profession itself, that when they see these things, they will dig into their own pocket. They will set up systems and services in their schools to address these problems. At the last school I was in, before I stopped my job, I walked into the head teacher's office. There was an entire household of furniture sitting arranged around his desk, suitcases and everything like that. I did wonder whether he was moving out himself, but it turned out, more sadly than that, that a family had just been made homeless. The head teacher had gone round with the taxi to take up all of their belongings and was storing it in his office while they could find somewhere else to live. It's those sorts of things that happen in schools on a regular basis that speak very highly of the profession, but don't speak very highly of a society that forces them to step in and do that. Because schools can perform their best when they focus on what it is that their core job is, which is to educate the next generation and know that we have strong and effective social care services, that we have strong and effective child and adolescent mental health services, and all of the other many things that other people are trained to specialise in as well. So I think it's very dangerous when we allow schools, force schools to step in. If we can allow them to focus on what they're good at, that would be useful. And of course, this leads me on to the idea of the self-improving school system as well, which is a very significant attempt to shift responsibilities that have been given to other parts of the system, whether it be the old National College, for example, that we were discussing earlier, which is now heading into its final stages, or most particularly the local authorities that used to exist as well. And I think the self-improving school system is a very beguiling fiction that is being created. And it's not that I don't believe that schools shouldn't be in charge of their own destinies, and it's not that I don't believe that the best source of support and advice for school improvement is to be found in other schools themselves. But I think what actually the self-improving school system was set up to do was to allow the government to cut the budgets of local authorities by about 40% over the last decade or so, and just expect schools to pick up all of the tasks that were being performed without transferring that money into the school budget as well. And that's a very dangerous way to look at it. Definitely schools should be helping other schools on school improvement, but they've actually been asked to find in their budgets all of the other services that we used to do. And the danger is, of course, it's a very beguiling term, because it is complimenting and flattering school leaders by saying you've got the resources, you've got the ideas to do something about it, and it's true to an extent, but it can't go all of the way. And this brings me to my final conclusion and the other half of the joke about not fighting on other people's territory. This does mean a highly pressured school environment. This does mean many new demands coming your way. It means regular changes to the curriculum and to policy. It means a reduction in the services and support that used to surround schools. The sense of pressure building up inside of the education system, I think, is palpable at the moment. And we can see it in the morale issues, we can see it in slightly declining retention, and we can see it in the recruitment problems that hit us so dramatically over the Christmas period. What do we do when we face increased pressure? Unfortunately, I think that there is a syndrome or a symptom within the education system that we respond to pressure with more pressure inside, that we try and do more to keep up with it. We do another initiative, we find another idea, we bring something else into our school. And it's understandable when the accountability system can be so inconsistent. If you don't know what the next Ofsted inspector is going to be looking for when they turn up to your school, the temptation is, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to get every policy right, everything is going to be perfect. If you're not sure what the next initiative is going to be, the temptation is to keep piling these initiatives up. And unfortunately, although it's understandable, I also think it's exactly the wrong way to respond to high-pressure, challenging, rapidly changing times. When that happens, what we need to do is strip out things. We need to cut back and ruthlessly focus over a long period of time on the 3 or 4 things that we are convinced, from our expertise and in our understanding of our children and the community we serve, are the things that will make the biggest difference. And we need to be able to stick to them over a long period of time. That's a very difficult counsel to give, because it also sounds like you need to stop learning from other schools and not come to conferences like this one and pick up lots of new ideas and then bring them back into your school and all the staff roll their eyes. This is another great idea coming our way. Conferences can be really dangerous on that front, and I speak as someone who spends most of their life at them doing this sort of thing. This is my redemption, if you like, for all the great ideas that I've forced on other schools. And it does make people roll their eyes to a degree. And actually, one of the things that they do is wait it out. And they think, well, this is the thing that they're into at the moment. If I wait long enough, they'll go to another conference. And there'll be a different idea coming their way. And I'll carry on doing what I was always doing. Now, actually, I think that's a really rational response to these sorts of pressures coming in, and I think we should adopt it as a strategic policy at the school level as well. And I like to call it the art of strategic procrastination. The next time the government or an official or someone else or a conference speaker comes up with a great idea, try and wait it out, just to see whether it's going to be here in 6 months' time. If it's good enough, it will still be around. And it does happen every now and again. The government comes up with a good idea, and you want to be part of it. But you want to be part of it because it was something that you were going to do anyway. And it fits your values, it fits your strategy for your school, it was one of your priorities, and you're more than happy to take the pilot funding, be a Pathfinder school, do whatever needs to be done on that basis, but you do it because you want to as well. And I think that actually, that those of you who've been through it many times know that education policy is a pendulum or a cycle, and it goes round. Things become fashionable and then unfashionable again. If you hold true to your nerve, you will go in and out of fashion on a regular basis. And I think, I'm not sure how long the cycle is, it's 7 to 9 years or something like that. Every 7 years or so, you will be the flavour of the month. And everyone will come visit your school to see what you're doing, and then they'll go away again and they'll see something else, and you'll keep doing what you've always done. And actually, that's the right way to go about it. Keep an eye on the outside world, learn from other schools, but set a really high bar for when you will allow something to change the carefully thought through strategy that you have. And that will happen from time to time, but it will be rare, I think. And I think your teachers and your colleagues and your pupils will thank you for that, because they can focus on getting better rather than on just constantly changing what they're doing next. I think what you need to think of with any new idea that you're evaluating, it would be something along the lines of, what if this was the only new thing we were allowed to do for the next 5 years? Would we still do it? And if it passes that hurdle, then I think that's well worth doing. So I can feel my voice leaving me at the moment, so I'm getting over a cold. That's a great time, I think, to stop. I hope that was useful to you. Thank you very much.